Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your money. So, classic Doctor Who review time. I wanted this out last month, but had some issues with YouTube. Don't feel like getting into it. But as the first Doctor story, we're going to talk about the Romans. So, this was an odd one. This is one of the historical ones, and of course, early Doctor Who historical stories means no aliens whatsoever. It's just the Doctor and companions in a historical setting, just engaging with that setting and the people in it, which is fine. It's something Doctor Who used to do, hasn't done in a while. I don't think there's been a pure historical absent, sci-fi elements since I think Black Orchid. And even that one's kind of debatable because the story's so weird. I haven't covered that one on this channel yet, have I? I'm going to have to eventually. Anyways, it starts out pretty good, but then its true intentions become more evident as it goes. This was written to be a funny episode, and I don't think it really is. It's not horribly painful. It's not like overloaded with cringe. It's not like badly aged humor for the most part. There's a little bit, but like by and large it's fine. It feels very forced. This is kind of set up structurally a little bit like a farce. So we have the Doctor, Ian, Barbara, and Vicky. This is her first outing in the TARDIS after having been introduced in the previous story, if I have my timeline right on that. And they are just in Rome. They are hanging out at like a villa that's currently unoccupied because the owner is away traveling, doing something. But so they're just hanging out because they can. And eventually the Doctor gets mistaken for a recently assassinated, famed lyre player. And he and Vicky get escorted to Rome to meet the Emperor Nero. I'll come back to him. And there's, of course, the sort of usual mistaken identity shenanigans and the Doctor having to, fake, knowing stuff or being good at stuff that he doesn't know or doesn't know how to do, and all that sort of stuff. And then for Ian and Barbara, they are attacked, captured, and sold as slaves. Slightly less amusing and entertaining, and yet, some aspects of that are still played for comedy. So, oh boy, and like the very nature, like I don't have an inherent problem. I actually think it's kind of an interesting idea to have in a 4-person TARDIS team, 2 of the companions basically off on their own thing while the Doctor and another companion are off doing their thing, and they actually never meaningfully cross paths while stuff is going on. That in and of itself I'm okay with, but there are a lot of forced to near misses. There's a lot of comedy of errors structuring where, like, if the Doctor would just, look through that set of curtains, he'd see Barbara right there and maybe sort out some of what's going on. But no, we're gonna play that all for laughs. So I mentioned Nero. Roman emperors and Nero in specific, because Nero was the same emperor who was chosen to be depicted for Mel Brooks's History of the World Part 1. There is a tendency to depict Nero in a very overtly comedic way, which is kind of odd given how awful he was. I mean, like, it's not like you can't paint a terrible person in a humorous light. You can. Maybe this is just me because I know I studied too much about this stuff growing up, but Nero became an emperor at 17, was dead by 31, and they keep getting these 40-somethings to play him, and it's just always off. Like, in my mind, if you're going to do Nero, whether you're doing him, slovenly and detached and silly and kind of addled in the head, there should be a youthful energy behind it, because that was part of his issue amongst a lot of other stuff. But anyway, that shouldn't matter. That's a personal nitpick. To sort of take a break from criticisms, I do want to stress there's actually a lot of good character moments in this. That, I think, is the strength of it. And that's what it leaned really heavily on in the first couple episodes before the plot kind of took over in the last two. But a lot of these characters get really great moments. Barbara actually gets to hold her own in a few ways. She has a really cute moment early on with Ian, where they're alone in the villa and they're like, they're drinking something, and he goes, this drink could really use some ice. And Barbara goes, oh, I think there's still some in the fridge. And Ian goes up and heads over, like, out of instinct before remembering we're in ancient Rome. What do you mean the fridge? So, like, and she does it just to mess with him. And that's a fun, cute moment. He later turns that around on her in the very last episode. That felt less clever and more like, I needed to get you back, which, given everything they'd already been through, seemed like an odd priority for him to have. But like, that was a neat little moment. Barbara is doing a lot to hold her own when she's in this really dire and drastic situation of being sold as a slave. And while thankfully, given the time that it aired, it does not get into a lot of the horrific implications of what that would have been like for somebody in her position, it also doesn't seem to pretend that stuff doesn't happen. It kind of shies away from it because of who specifically buys her and for what purposes. It kind of still lets the implication of what could have happened if somebody else had bought her hang in the air, which is kind of ballsy for the show. Or, well, it could be ballsy or it could be ignorant. It could be just not taking the subject matter as seriously as they should, and it results in something good. I don't know. There's no way for me to know that. Ian ends up on a barge, as a rower, and that aspect is okay. Once he gets off the barge, he ends up in this dynamic with this other guy who was a slave that's actually not too bad. Again, some pretty decent character moments. It really kind of is, once Nero shows up, the comedy gets cranked up a bit, because nearly every scene that Nero is in, and like, it's not the actor's fault. He did what they asked him to do, and he does it well. And look, if it works for you, you're probably having a ball. I was enjoying the character beats and giving all these individual characters these little interesting moments to shine, and then he just kind of blunders in and drags this comedy roadkill with him. I don't know what I was going for with that metaphor, but yeah, there's one aspect that does tie specifically with Nero that I do like, and it is a moment where the Doctor gets to be clever. Like, the Doctor gets to be clever a fair bit in this. We find out early on with, like, him and Vicky, they uncover, that there's this assassination plot, and this person did that, and this person's trying to do that, and there's this conspiracy, and the Doctor basically goes, oh yes, I already knew that. He doesn't chide Vicky, but it kind of has this sense of, like, what, are you that far behind? You're only just realizing. But he isn't doing that grumpily the way earlier First Doctor would do. He's doing this with Hartnell has his whimsy charm at a higher level in this, kind of like what you might see in something like The Time Meddler, and that's always a good fit on him. This sort of like, ooh, isn't this fascinating? And like, even when he gets put in a position where he is expected to play the liar masterfully and he can't and doesn't know how, he still doesn't panic, which is part of what keeps it from being cringe comedy. He thinks of silly, yes, but within a silly framing, clever ways to get out of it, ultimately resulting in him basically pulling an Emperor's New Clothes move at the big performance he's supposed to give, where he claims that only those with the truest ear for masterful music will be able to hear this. And is that ridiculous? Yes, of course it is. But again, by that point, Nero's been around, so we've kind of raised the bar for ridiculousness for the episode, and it plays pretty well. It plays like a clever moment. So this is an episode that I wouldn't, to make it better, I don't think it needs that much in the way of change. I think it just needs some tweaking and rebalancing in terms of where the emphasis is and how it's spread out. Like if we want to have some comedic elements, we could still have them. We need to not, or at least for my taste, it would be much better if it didn't hang like this heavy comedy anchor around the neck of Nero and just make him drag that. Now I have him drag an anchor. It was roadkill before. What am I doing with these metaphors? I don't know. But Nero and the need for the comedic aspect, and like I did mention some of the jokes don't age great. So like him chasing Barbara around in that kind of Benny Hill kind of way. I'd call that a poorly aged joke. But, whatever. There's other little moments that are kind of played comedically that I get what they were going for, but it just seems slightly odd in Doctor Who. Like, some of them are jokes that in a vacuum I kind of like, but it still feels off here. Like, there's this whole thing with a goblet being poisoned, and, like, the Doctor kind of brings Nero's attention to it. And Nero has his servant drink it, and the servant takes one sip and just immediately keels over. Vizzini from Princess Bride style. And is that a funny bit? Yeah, sure. It's the poison that kills you instantly. That's always fun, but also, like, felt off to have that joke in this show, in a show where also two of the characters have been sold into slavery. And I think just the balance of elements is just off a little bit. And it made the back half a little bit of a slog, just kind of waiting for it to wrap up. First half was pretty good, though. And there are still decent character beats across it that make it the reason to watch. I think most of the characters, Vicky doesn't get a ton. Like, she is kind of functionally Barbara by a different name. Like, the personality is a little different. I don't mean to overly equate them. It's not like the actress wasn't doing her own thing with it, but the character isn't given a lot to differentiate her in this particular story. But she's also not bad, and she's not stuck with having to scream all over the place. She is at least more actively engaging with the Doctor in terms of what's going on. Helpful, not especially, but she gives him somebody to play off. They play off well enough, and Ian and Barbara get moments to shine. Hartnell legitimately gets some really good moments. There's good stuff in here. It's just the comedy kind of took it over, which is a shame. Well, the Romans. You seen this one? What'd you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe even. They all help me out. Don't worry too much about it, though. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can come on back next time you need a break. And now to shout out my highest supporting patrons. Robin Moore, Jared Boyce, Zubin Lutfula, Auntie Kate 808, Mira G, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Oliver B, Sean Miller, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Melissa Pedersen, Becky Sparks, Ulrich, Loki Eris, Tracy Scrabbit, Pal Barabajoggle, Sir Didymus is my favorite, and starting this month, I'm going to shout out 3 random supporters from the other tiers. So this month, my thanks to Tommy Castronova, Tim Price, and Caramelized Captain. If you want to hear me shout you out, check out the reward tiers on the Patreon. I put them one on each shoulder. They consolidated immediately. So, thanks, guys.